This is US Vice President JD Vance. He's one of the most powerful men in the world at the moment and recently made this statement that shocked many.
In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
This statement at the Munich Security Conference sparked reactions from politicians and societies around the world. But does JD Vance actually have a point? Is Europe's freedom of speech really in retreat? We took a closer look at some of his claims at the Munich Security Conference.
I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content.
This claim is misleading. In our research, we found out that the media reported on the topic back in July 2023. Thierry Breton, the former European Commissioner for Internal Market, referred to the possibility of a social media shutdown under the EU's content moderation law in extreme cases only. But this would be one last step in a chain of possibilities to prevent hateful content online. Breton referred to the Digital Services Act, short DSA, which was fully applied in 2024. In the interview, he responded to French President Emmanuel Macron, who raised the possibility of blocking social media platforms during a wave of civil unrest in the country. The reason for the demonstrations was the police killing a 17-year-old boy in a Paris suburb. Still, NGOs raised concerns over Breton's comments. But does the DSA actually allow EU member states to shut down social media during times of unrest? It's not as easy as Vance claims. The DSA regulates online platforms such as social networks and app stores and addresses issues such as illegal content and disinformation. Its main goal is to prevent illegal and harmful activities online and the spread of disinformation. The Act states that in certain situations, such as infringements, where there is a threat to the life or safety of people, EU member states can request a competent judicial authority to order the temporary restriction of access of recipients to the service concerned by the infringement.
Diese Möglichkeit unterliegt sehr, sehr hohen Anforderungen. Es geht da um Gefahr für Leib und Leben und Ähnliches. Also ich sehe nicht, dass das in Verbindung mit den üblichen Dingen, die man so in sozialen Netzwerken vorfindet, jemals zur Anwendung kommen würde.
That means, to be able to restrict the use of a social media platform, all other measures outlined in the DSA must have been exhausted. The US Vice President also referred to country-specific events to defend his claim on the alleged decline of European freedom of speech.
This last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law.
According to Vance, in Scotland, if you live in certain areas, it could be illegal to pray at home. This is misleading. Vance failed to mention the context in which the safe access zones he referred to were established. In many countries, anti-abortion activists protest in front of abortion clinics to convince women who want to have an abortion to change their minds. Some of their tactics include handing out flyers, showing photos of fetuses, and making public prayers to put pressure on these women. In September 2024, the Scottish government introduced a regulation to prevent this from happening within 200 meters distance from the clinics. The idea behind the so-called Abortion Services Act is to provide women a safe access zone to the clinic. The act explains that any action that intentionally or recklessly influences or prevents somebody's decision to have an abortion within this boundary can be considered an offense. Harassing the person, holding up anti-abortion signs, and yes, also holding so-called silent prayers within these 200 meters could be considered an offense as well. But silent prayers at home with no distress to others are not included in the ban. Gillian McKay, member of the Scottish Parliament, reacted to Vance's claim on X. The letter was sent to households to inform them of what the zones mean for them. As we discussed in the passage of the Act, no individual behavior is criminalized. Silent prayer or praying in your own home are not illegal as stated by the VP. Vance also raised concerns about religious freedom elsewhere in the UK.
A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes.
Vance claims that Smith Connor was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law and that he was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. But this claim is misleading as well. What's true is that Adam Smith Connor was convicted of breaching a safe zone because he prayed outside an abortion clinic in Bournemouth in November 2022. But the context matters here. After refusing repeated requests to leave the area, he was handed a £100 fine which he didn't pay. That's why he had to go to court, and that's also why he was given a 2-year conditional discharge and had to pay prosecution costs of £9,000, which is around $11,300. Back then, Smith Connor said that he had been praying for his son, who had been aborted more than 20 years ago. What's also interesting to mention is that Smith Connor is receiving legal support from an American conservative legal advocacy group that has been labeled as a hate group by the non-profit organization Southern Poverty Law Center. He has appealed the decision. Vice President Vance made further claims about freedom of speech in Europe on the social media platform X. He shared a clip from a report produced by the US-American broadcaster CBS on Germany's approach to policing online hate speech. The post caused a lot of discussions online. Vance argues that insulting someone is not a crime, and criminalizing speech is going to put real strain on European-US relationships. It's not clear if Vance is expressing that insulting someone should not be a crime at all, or referring to German law. When it comes to Germany, insulting is a crime. And in several other nations as well. According to German law, an insult is punishable by a custodial sentence of up to 2 years or a monetary penalty. From 2021 onwards, a law to combat right-wing extremism and hate crime online was added. It serves to protect all people who are threatened and insulted online. This allows police and judiciary to take more action against inhuman hate speech. But we have to consider that the law and the legal practice vary in different countries, and there is no universal understanding where freedom of speech should be limited and where an insult or even hate speech begins.
Es gibt tatsächlich ein unterschiedliches Verständnis zwischen Freedom of Speech im amerikanischen Sinne und der Meinungsfreiheit im deutschen oder auch europäischen Sinne. Die Freedom of Speech wurde in der amerikanischen Tradition immer schon weiter verstanden und die Einschränkungsmöglichkeiten sind hier restriktiver, als sie nach dem deutschen und europäischen Verständnis sind.
These are 4 examples of statements made by US Vice President JD Vance recently. JD Vance is using these statements to support his idea that freedom of speech is declining in Europe. But as the facts have shown, they cannot be taken as evidence for that. What matters is the definition of freedom of speech, and according to experts, sometimes laws are needed to protect certain groups. In Germany, for example, there are specific limits of freedom of speech to protect a person's dignity.
Schon nach dem Grundgesetz ist die Meinungsfreiheit nicht unbeschränkt gewährleistet, sondern sie findet ihre Schranken unter anderem in allgemeinen Gesetzen, und dazu gehören beispielsweise die Strafgesetze, die Bedrohung, Beleidigung, Volksverhetzung und Ähnliches verhindern. Das ist auch überhaupt nichts Neues, sondern seit vielen, vielen Jahren, Jahrzehnten so etabliert.
Meinungsfreiheit ist die Freiheit, rechtlich es sagen zu dürfen, sagen zu können, aber nicht es ohne Konsequenzen des sozialen Umfelds sagen zu können.
Therefore, it is possible to say anything you want in Europe, but you may face consequences if you break the law. Did you see other misleading or false claims online we should check for you? Then text us at factchecking@dw.com.